Cybersecurity Summit, and this is our 2 o'clock session. And what I'm going to do is we are going to, each of us, introduce ourselves, that are those that are presenting today. And so we have representation today from local, state, and federal government. And we're going to discuss things from the agency side as well as you as a corporate individual, and what you need to know that government can do or not do for you, as well as what agencies are doing internally. So I am Dawn YANKEELOV. I am Executive Director of TALK, the Technology Association of Louisville, Kentucky, and we are part of the 4th Annual TALK Cybersecurity Summit today. I'm going to have James Meece introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
Hey, good afternoon, Dawn. Thanks for having me on this panel. As Dawn said, my name is James Meece. I've been with Metro as the Chief Information Security Officer since 2015. I'm also a 30-year member of the Kentucky National Guard with a specialization in signal and electronic warfare.
Okay, Klint Walker.
I'm Klint Walker. I'm with the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, so the new CISO branch. I am the Cybersecurity Advisor for Region 4, or one of 3 now Cybersecurity Advisors for Region 4, but I specifically cover Kentucky, Tennessee, and Georgia.
David Carter.
I'm David Carter. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for the Commonwealth Office of Technology, and we do security governance oversight and infrastructure security for the executive branch of state government.
All right, so now we're gonna get started in our conversation. So we'll start with ransomware. We won't limit ourselves today just to that, but in your role, what do you do if ransomware is reported within government? And then what do you do if ransomware attacks are reported in enterprises outside of government to government? So kind of the both sides of the coin. So we'll start with James. On the local level, how do you handle things?
So for us, if ransomware is reported internal to our network, we immediately enact our response and continuity of government plans in conjunction with the overarching Louisville Metro Emergency Management Continuity of Government Plan. A vital part of this response for us is having a pre-staged, immutable backup copy that is of all your important data that's frequently tested. Our stance is never pay the ransom, because you don't know what else the bad guys are doing. A lot of people, even some people local to Jefferson County, have been hit with ransomware, and they pay the ransom, and then 3 months later, the ransomware again because the core problem wasn't fixed when they were unlocked. Really, if you're hit, the only true way to recover is totally rebuild. If we observe attacks outside of government, we use those tactics, techniques, and procedures and the indicators of compromise we learn to teach our own threat platform what to look for. Basically, we learn by others' mistakes. You see a fire, you know how to prevent it. We would, in a case like a partner or someone we work with inside of Kentucky, if they were hit, we would offer as much assistance and advice as allowed by law as well.
Okay. And, Klint, at the federal level?
Well, James is going to make me tear up a little bit here and say, don't pay the ransom. It's something that we, at the federal level, we preach a lot as well. So I'm usually the one that people are reporting ransomware to. From the federal level, we try and assist in however we can, depending on the organization. If it's a ransomware we've seen before or something that we have keys to, we can gladly hand over the keys. But we have malware analysis that can help you determine what type of ransomware you have been hit with, who the threat actors are. We can bring the FBI involved if that's the level you want to go to as well. But honestly, like James was saying, that once ransomware hit, there's not a whole lot the federal government can do for you. If it's something we haven't seen before or something that there's no known keys for, it's up to your backup strategy. It's up to how you're going to do it. So if you're not practicing or exercising your continuity of operations plans or your disaster recovery plans or your cyber program, then there's not a whole lot anybody can do to assist you except for helping you rebuild. So the federal government, we can come in and assist, partially with helping you rebuild, but it's mostly going to be how are your backups, how are you able to respond to it, and what data was important, what was important that you lost, and is this a criminal matter or something that we can start getting the FBI involved with, as far as, was there some other loss of life or imminent, threat to the nation involved with that ransomware.
At the state level, David, where do you stand on that? And have you had to deal with that at all at the state level?
We have fared fairly well. Security guys don't tend to like to talk about the fact that we have fared well because, something bad will happen at 4 o'clock this afternoon. But overall, I think James and Klint hit on some of the very key issues with preparing for ransomware is be prepared. Have your backup strategies in place, have those layered backups. The state uses multiple different mechanisms for backups to have that immutable copy of our data. We do data synchronization to an alternate data center. We have stringent backup regimens that run regularly. So from the data perspective, we make sure that we have everything that we need to recover a system because like the others have mentioned, we don't pay ransom either. We don't feed the machine. You pay that ransom, you get made a target. You get painted a target as somebody that does pay. So that will make you a good target. So when we have something that occurs in our environment, we're able to achieve some pretty rapid containment using our endpoint detection and response system, which works out really well for us. We can contain it to a small area and kind of encapsulate it so it doesn't spread into the environment. So that's kind of our strategy internally is to rely on our security mechanisms, a strong incident response plan, and then on the recovery side to leverage our backup regimes to be able to pull that data back and get us back in business. And we've been fairly successful at that without any major loss. As far as helping those outside of the state government, we have legal challenges there. We can't really lay hands on somebody else's machines. That opens up the state's liability. We don't have the laws really to support that. But I and my team are servants of the Commonwealth. We're here to serve the citizens of the state. So if there's businesses or citizens that have issues like this, they can certainly call us for consultation, and we'll help guide them a little bit from our experience and what we've seen, and strategies going forward on how to make themselves a little stronger in the end. Like I said, we can't lay hands on, but we can at least share our experience, our expertise, and the things that can help make them stronger.
So, Klint, can you characterize any of the problems we've seen at a national level with cities, particularly? I believe we've seen more ransomware with cities, right?
Well, the threat actors are going to go after people that they think either don't have robust cybersecurity programs, or like with a lot of governments, there's so many, let's say cooks in the kitchen. There's so many operating divisions that it's easy to social engineer or try and fish your way through, because all it takes is one person clicking on something and then you're into the network. So, but the threat actors really try and target people who can't live without their data. So that's your state and local governments, that's your hospitals, that's your banking industry. So anybody who has to make decisions real time, and even with with a lot of the cities that we work with, if they're doing even nightly backups, the amount of business that gets done in a day. So if the ransomware hits you at 5 o'clock, and the last time you did a backup was last night, that's a whole day's worth of data. Can you really afford to lose that? And most cities say no, we can't afford to lose that. So finding a strategy that works for your organization, even if it's incremental throughout the day, finding ways to have both online and offline backups. Finding the strategy, because there's no one size fits all. And that's what I think we find with a lot of organizations is everybody's trying to follow an industry best practice when it needs to be a specific best practice for them. They need to tailor whatever solution they find to their organization, to their data sets, to their timetables. And that's what most people don't realize. Everybody's worried about, recovery time objectives and not as much about recovery point objectives. Is the data still valuable to your organization if you have to restore from it? Is that data already become too aged or no longer usable for you? So I think that's the strategy that most people are missing is what data sets do you need? What's the time frame you need them in? And are you backing them up within, the right time frame so that they'll be of use to you if you get hit by ransomware? So that's why we see the threat actors going after the targets they are, because these people can't live without their data right now. Imagine a hospital that couldn't access their health record systems, and they need to know whether a patient got medication an hour ago or 15 minutes ago, because they know that they need to give them medication, but if they give them too much, it could kill them. or something like that. So that's what we're at, is the threat actors know how to hit us, and they know how to give us very little time, to try and get an answer back to them. If they're not going to hit you 2 weeks before paychecks are due out, they're going to hit you 2 hours before paychecks are due out. Do you make a different decision to pay the ransom or not pay the ransom if you have 2 hours to make that decision versus 2 weeks to make that decision? So you have to keep that in mind.
Klint, that's an interesting catch-22 that these agencies and government organizations put themselves in. They can't afford to live without the data, but most of them say they can't afford to protect it properly.
And that brings to point the value of a business impact analysis, which is really just a fancy, term for understanding your data and the criticality of your business and what those recovery point objectives are. How critical is it that you get this back up and running in short order, and do you have the backup strategies and the recovery strategies to make that happen in that time frame? So it's really about just having a better understanding of your business and the criticality of that data to your business.
It's like the old adage, for want of a nail, the war was lost. People sometimes don't understand what the nail is. They haven't done a deep, as you said, business impact analysis down to the data layer. We talk to people all the time about, do you do asset management? And most organizations come to us and say, we have a great asset management program. When we come in and look at their program with them, they have a good inventory management program, but they don't have good asset management because they forget that data is an asset. As a matter of fact, data is more important than the inventory. Nobody cares if you lost that $200 laptop. You care what was the data on the laptop when you lost that $200 laptop. It's the data that's important, not the equipment. And so people are more worried about whether they have an inventory of what equipment they have, but they forget about the data. And the data is what ransomware is going after. And when you don't have access to that data, that one little nail that you're missing can cause the whole system to fall apart. And we see that time and again is, well, we didn't know that one spreadsheet over here that was on Martha's computer was the most important thing in our entire inventory. We thought it was all the information we needed was coming out of the database, but really it was being pulled from this spreadsheet. Or we didn't understand that data link we have between us and this one business vendor was where all our usable information in real time was coming from. So if you don't understand your data, you don't understand your data flows or data processes, it's impossible to put a good protection, especially a good counter ransomware strategy around that data.
Yeah, the relationship mapping in asset management is important. Knowing where that data lives, where the dependencies are, and the interrelationship between the systems is important as well, because then you know where that threat can cross boundaries.
Are we seeing a lot more cyber attacks because of COVID-19 and some of the concerns around this? Is this an area that has generated certain types of attacks or breaches or very specific types of ransomware? I don't know. Whoever wants to answer, James?
Yeah, well, we've seen a definite increase in scams and phishing attacks related to COVID-19. The bad guys want to play on your fears. It's a lot easier to get someone to click something or open something when it relates to their personal health and wellness. We've seen, Klint could probably expand on it better, but we've seen thousands of suspicious COVID-related websites being created. Some of them are innocuous, but some of them are being used for payload delivery of malware or scams to steal your money. The tactics the bad guys use have been changed a little bit because of the impact of COVID-19. It's led everybody to go to a mostly remote workforce. So they've changed their tactics. They're going after teleconferencing platforms or VPN clients more so than they used to. Zoom, not to target the current environment, but Zoom's a good example of how the current situation shined a bright light on an emerging technology, and the bad guys latched onto it, and all of a sudden there's all these 0 days and all these flaws in the way it's configured, and people are scrambling to buy the enterprise version so they could mitigate some of that. Personally, we've moved away from Zoom as much as we could, but we know we can't do it totally because there's 35 million users at last count. There's still some privacy concerns and things, but I think they've pretty much mitigated a big portion of that. But in short, the bad guys know that we're remote. They know we're using these new technologies, so they are attacking us.
I'll jump onto that and say that.
Right ahead.
Thank you, David. I'll say that, we haven't seen any new malware. It's the same old malware being used, but as James was pointing out, it's the techniques and tactics that have changed with the malware. It's who the targets are going to be. The healthcare industry is now probably target number one. And so you have, once again, because you have all these people going to the hospital, you have all these things that need to get done. So the ransomware authors or your criminal actors are looking to make a quick buck. But then we also have a higher profile. So we have the nation state actors. So, the FBI has put out the warning about China wanting to try and get intellectual property or data on our COVID response, on, how we're, anybody who's doing research or development on cures and or antidotes or anything like that. So they're trying to get intellectual property. They're trying to either get it for themselves or find a way to slow us down in our response. That's the sort of thing we're looking at. So it's changed dramatically, but the threat actor is the same, but they're shifting their focus to where the hot button issues are. And then of course the misinformation campaigns jump in as well, which are your hoaxes, your scams, and things like that are popping up as well. But the technology, the malware itself is the same stuff, Emotep and all that fun stuff that we've been seeing already. It's just reskinned to be toward the new thing. Everybody wants information, so everybody's more willing right now to click on a COVID, or current, awareness links and stuff like that to get that information. So we just have to do our due diligence and say, do I really need to open this? Am I really certain where this came from? And is this something I need to deal with now, or is it something I need to deal with on my work computer versus maybe my phone or my personal computer?
At the state level, we've seen pretty much the same thing. We've seen the same threats we see every day. We're seeing increased volumes. We're seeing more targeting at our users because they know our users are at home. And one of the things that we're seeing is that users at home are probably a little less diligent than when they're sitting in the office. It's that change of environment that kind of takes them off guard a little bit. So we've stepped up our efforts to fish our own people. We've kind of shaken them a little bit here and there just to keep them in the mindset that even though they're working from home, they're sitting in their living room or they're sitting in their kitchen or like me sitting in your garage, you're still in a professional environment and there's still those risks there. And we've waken them up a little bit, and our last phishing campaign was fairly successful and lots of teachable moments came out of that. So our users do pretty good. We've had this awareness campaign going for quite some time, and we've seen time after time an increase, but we did see a little dip when we went into the COVID crisis. It's really educating the users an important aspect of keeping this remote workforce safe.
At the state level, isn't there a way to report issues? I believe there is for scams. Is there something similar for cyber issues?
Absolutely. We have it in policy, a reporting procedure for cyber-related incidents or security-related incidents. We have integrated into our Outlook clients the ability to report directly from the client if there's a email-related threat. We have a service desk that is available 24/7 that is a point of contact for anybody in state government that has an issue. So we've got multiple paths, and they all lead back to my teams.
On the consumer side at the state level, isn't there a way to report as well? Like if somebody is having an issue with a particular item?
Yes, there are several mechanisms through our Attorney General's office for reporting, and they will share that information with us as needed if it involves technology or cyber, and that's a fairly good relationship there that we can work together real well on.
Yes, they was it Kentucky COVID-19.ky.gov website for COVID has some of those links in it. The scam links. Yeah.
So you can go directly to the Attorney General's website. It's available there as well.
Let's talk about the protests. Are we seeing more activity tied to dealing with the protests and some of the environments that we are, contending with at that level?
In short, yes. Metro has been in the news quite a lot for things that are going on, and we are definitely under a microscope and under the gun. whenever something happens that involves a government entity, no matter which way it politically leans, no matter which group it involves, someone's going to get mad. And that people getting mad nowadays means they're going to be targeted. In our case, a lot of people were motivated to take action, and this led to some online groups to give us some special attention. We've seen attempts at denial of service, website defacements, increased targeted phishing based on the protests and some of the political things around that. We've also seen social media being expertly used to sway public sentiment and to basically dox metro entities, personnel, leadership. And all this is going to lead to subsequent additional attacks. So I can't say enough about my guys, the work they've done over the last 2 weeks to just keep the digital government going. Really into tunes of tens of millions more events than we normally see over this time frame. The IT agency and the cyber team have really done an excellent job on keeping business going, but we are under the gun.
Yeah, at the state level, we've kind of felt the same impacts. James and I have collaborated on what he is seeing as well, and we're at the state. We're really interested in ensuring that all the citizens have a voice. If they have a voice, they have to share with state government. We want to hear that voice. But when there's so many people fueled by social media campaigns trying to have their voice heard at the same time, it has impacts. We've had to manage our phone systems. We've had to manage our email and make sure that we do it in such a way that the communications from the citizens get to the right people, so their voice is heard. So, in private sector, it's a lot easier. You can just drop things that are impacting your infrastructure. In state government, we want to make sure that the citizen is connected to their government. So we've had to work, and my team and many of the technology teams within the Commonwealth Office of Technology have spent a lot of hours in making sure that our infrastructure stands up against all of the influx of traffic that we've had, and then we're able to route that traffic to the right people so that the communication is heard. So many people don't understand that they're one voice, one email, but when you've got 1 million people doing it, that's a lot of email. That's a lot of impact to state government, and it hurts your communications. But again, we've responded well. We've kept our systems up and stable, and we've been able to weather the storm.
One of the interesting things we saw, David, was that probably 75% of the increased email and phone traffic that were generated by the social media campaigns came from outside Kentucky.
We saw the same thing.
Social media, it's the best and the worst.
Yes. Klint, do you have any other comments about the states you're covering?
So, just to show on what they've already been talking about, is we've seen all the same things at the national level. We've talked about kind of the criminal actors up to this point. We've talked about the nation states, but this is where we start adding in what we call the hacktivists. And hacktivists can be very chaotic in that you never know what they're going to go after. You never know what's going to set them off. And they don't always have a rhyme or reason. So they might, want to go after the police department, but the county's website is easier, so they'll face the county's website or the waterworks or something that has nothing to do with the police department. They'll face somebody else's website to get their point across. They're going to have a wider path of destruction on the internet, so to speak, and they're going to go after anything that they can get their hands on. So you have to have a more kind of comprehensive or robust cybersecurity plan when dealing with activists, because you just don't know. He's already said they're going to go doxing, trying to find high-ranking officials within the organization and posting their private information online. They're going to go with social media campaigns. They're going to go with website defacements, denial of service attacks. One of the big things we're seeing is people trying to attack 911 systems so that people can't call for help during these times, or trying to miscommunicate or get the police to move around. So that's the other thing that you have to be worried about. It's not technically a cyber attack, but the misinformation campaigns that go along with it, trying to get people from a social media standpoint to do specific actions, to get maybe white supremacists to show up at a black rally, or get people to bring guns to a knife fight kind of thing. That's what you're looking at, is you're trying to get people to do physical acts, in what normally would have been a very calm or good protest. And so that's what we're seeing is these misinformation campaigns along with the cyber attacks, along with the hacktivists. And so it's just causing a lot of chaos.
Then we have elections, coming up. Dave, do you want to address like some of the things the state has had to do to deal with election security?
Well, and election security is really outside of the Commonwealth Office of Technology. That's held by the State Board of Elections and Secretary of State. But we have a profoundly good partnership with those agencies, and we've been working with them closely to make sure that the technology is there to support what they need, that the security is there to support what they need. I tell you, they are a very committed group of individuals to support the election process, and they leverage their partnerships wherever they can. We've been working with National Guard. We've been working with our federal partners to make sure that we've got the right security in place. So it's been a tremendous effort by a lot of different groups coming together for a common cause, but it's worked out really well. And I think we're prepared. We've got the right systems out in the field to be able to handle the new process. And it's not necessarily a new process; it's repurposing an old process, but we're doing it in a larger scale to make sure people have the ability to vote and still feel socially distant as they need to. But it's going really well, and I think Kentucky's prepared to make sure every vote counts.
But do you see any new processes from your side on election security in general?
In general, it's more continuous monitoring, making sure that you've got eyes on what's coming into your system. So there's those people that want to impact elections, and they don't have to impact the voting. All they have to do is introduce something that may call into question the validity of the process. So even if it's just voter registration data that doesn't actually impact the count, it still is election related. So making sure that we've got the right things in place to monitor those, and the State Board of Elections made those investments, and they've done a good job of it.
Sir James, do you want to comment on election security at all?
The only thing that I'll really jump in with is that election security is very blended between physical security and cybersecurity. The election system, I've worked very closely with the state of Kentucky on their election systems, and a lot of it is self-contained systems that there's not a whole lot of opportunity there. Once again, as David said, it's more about make people mistrust the system, even though there's no real threat there. But the real threat to the elections process right now is COVID, really. I mean, you're looking at a lot of your poll workers. Most of your poll working volunteers are going to be in the age group that COVID, is directly going to come after. So a lot of people might drop out of being, volunteers, or they might not have or how do you train the new people? If a lot of people start dropping out, how are you going to get training for all the equipment, all the processes and procedures? How are you going to, and then with, if your facility can hold 20 people at a time, but the COVID regulations in the state say only 4 people can be because there's not enough room for 6 feet of separation, or, how do you impact, you might have long lines starting to form because you can only get, where you used to be able to get 100 people through, now you can only get 20 people through, so those are more of the issues that we're looking at around that. And then, if the protests are still going on, how are the protests going to impact, the election day with people showing up either to volunteer or, all the access to those facilities. That's what you have to worry about, I think, more right now. We are seeing more and more states going to the absentee ballots or the mail-in votes and stuff like that. I think that a lot of the states right now have said they've had record turnout for their absentee and their mail-in votes. So that's great news. And, we're seeing a lot more people just taking cybersecurity seriously from every state. And I think the process has always been very solid. And I think with the amount of attention being paid to it and all parties coming together to work on it, I think it's a really good system we have going now. But I think some of the other issues out there, the misinformation campaigns, the COVID, the protests, might have a bigger impact than, say, a cybersecurity issue.
At the local government level, I started there in 2015, so that's when I really seriously started looking at election security. The only thing I would want to comment on is the increased level of collaboration across government agencies is very very encouraging. We constantly work with the election board in Jefferson County, and they have a pretty good system in place. But just looking across the state to COT, to Jefferson County, to these other agencies, and up to the federal level, the way people are starting to work together, taking this seriously as a serious threat, is very encouraging.
Those partnerships extend beyond the elections too. We're seeing the partnerships forward where we can work more together as a team going forward on things even outside of elections. So it's really, really good to see. I agree, James. Absolutely.
Let's talk about some of the resources available to corporations and individuals at the various levels that they can tap into if they're looking to support their cyber security practices. Dave, you could talk about the new group, or the group is growing, shall we say, in the cyber area, correct?
Absolutely. We've got a what's called a cyber threat work group. James and I both are members on that. It's driven by the Kentucky Office of Homeland Security, and it brings the cyber professionals together from private sector, government, to get together and talk about what resources are available out there, what threats are we seeing, what trends are we seeing, how can we be stronger as a state by forging some of those, private and public partnerships together to share information. And we're hoping to expand that group to reach more. The group seems to grow every year a little bit, and we're wanting to really take it to the next level now and really start making it a really good actionable group. James, you want to add anything about that?
Yeah, I'm just going to jump up on the stump and say the same thing. I encourage you, as a very first step, as either a private or a government cybersecurity professional, or even just in IT, if you're worried about security, join the Kentucky Cyber Threat Working Group. Dave or I, either one, can send you an invite. We meet at least once a month, sometimes more often, depending on what's going on. And we do want to grow this. It started out as an information sharing group, and we want to grow this into more of an actionable mutual aid for all of the Commonwealth type group.
What about InfraGard? Do you want to talk a little bit about that for a minute, James?
Yeah, the InfraGard is an FBI program that's much the same. Most states have chapters. They hold meetings on a regular basis as well. And one of the benefits of being a member of InfraGard is you get a direct finger on the pulse of what the federal government law enforcement is seeing in regards to cyber threat. So absolutely. I mean, there's other agencies that Dave and I participate in, and Klint could expand on some of them. FBI, InfraGard, ISSA, which has regional chapters, information security, CISO, which is a federal government service, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, and I've said it 3 times now, the Kentucky Cyber Threat Working Group. Stomped my foot a couple of times to make that point. Please join. Most of these agencies are informational agencies, but some of them can actually render aid if you need it. A lot of things provided by DHS through CISA and through the MSISAC are actually actionable at your level, so you can ask them to do a penetration test or a vulnerability scan, or do a business case analysis for your cybersecurity incident response plan, which we had done recently. All these are really good, but you should start at the Cyber Threat Working Group.
Yeah.
That's 4 times. Sorry.
All right. Yeah, that was good. You got it in there. All right. And then Klint, you want to talk about some of the resources through, is it still called the Cyber Advisor Program under DHS?
Cybersecurity Advisor Program, yes, CSA. But before that, I'm gonna foot stomp with James and David. I've been part of the Kentucky working group. I don't attend all the meetings, but I'm usually quietly on there listening and trying to give aid. And I've enjoyed watching that program grow and more. They've done a fantastic job. So I do highly suggest. I think every organization will get a lot of benefit out of joining, what Kentucky has done there. So that's fantastic as well. But for those people who want to reach out, they've already talked about the MSISAC, but there is an ISAC for pretty much every critical infrastructure out there. Joining an ISAC is another great way. AFCIA is another great program out there. But if you want to reach out to the federal government, we at CISA, we have, the CSA program, in which we have a plethora of tools and services, everything from pen testing to the cyber hygiene program, which is our external vulnerability scanning. We have threat and indicator sharing. We can do tabletop exercises with you. We can help you build your cybersecurity, exercise program. We can come in and do assessments to help you figure out where you are today with your cybersecurity program, where you want to be next year, where you want to be 3 years from now. These are all services through CISA that have no cost associated with them other than your time. So if you want more information on that, people can reach directly out to me, and I can send you either the fact sheets. Don, I think I've already gotten you the fact sheets. If not, I'll get them to you to distribute out. But we have a whole bunch of things. I can't even go into all of them right now because it would just take up too much time. There's so much out there that people can utilize from our program to help them with their program.
Yes, as panelists, if you could put in whatever contact points in the chat box that you think would be useful to people, that would be helpful too. And then I'll get the data sheets from Klint and send those out to anyone who registered for this particular session, which I think is almost like 30-something people. So we'll get started to push some of that data out, and then we'll put it up on our talklou.com website for the Tech Council. One of the things you did mention was AFCEA, and actually in Kentucky we have a very active AFCEA. I've been down to some of the meetings in Fort Knox. The Women in AFCEA group is extremely active as well. You get like 200 people at those meetings. So, I definitely encourage people, if you're not in Kentucky, you can join AFCEA in any of the states. And DC, of course, has a wonderful AFCEA organization for those that are corporations looking to learn more and be more active in cyber-specific activities, and also meeting up with government people for more support.
I just want to cheer a little bit for the federal services that Klint brought up. The state have partaken from that menu a lot over the years, and when you call them in for assistance, you're going to get expert guidance, expert assistance. It's a tremendous resource, and I would highly recommend it to anybody. And I would also recommend seeking out the ISACs, the Information Sharing and Analysis Centers, for your especially if you're in the critical infrastructure, because they're out there. We're a member of multi-state ISAC, and that is a tremendous resource for us. It's a truly collaborative group that I can reach across to all 50 states at one time, to all of my peers, and we work together on solutions, and we compare notes on problems and how we approach things. It is so valuable to have a group that you can pull together that is in your line of business, that sees the same business impacts that you do, and work together on solutions. So I would highly recommend that.
What David said.
Klint, is there a waiting period to get some of these services like vulnerability testing and such?
So for most of the services, there's no waiting list. It's usually just dependent upon either my calendar or if we have the team come out, the calendar for the team. A lot of the services, such as the vulnerability scanning, that's done by an automated system. So other than you just giving us permission to do it and filling out the form, those usually get started up right away. But anything that requires us to send a specialized team out, such as the full scope pen testing, there can be a wait list, as we have to prioritize based on national level interest. So of course, maybe election systems are first priority, nuclear power plants or, other things might be second priority. So there's an actual guideline. So there could be a year or 2 year waiting list for some of the more high end things, but most of the things that most organizations are going to benefit from, there's not a wait for those at all.
No. Well, let's talk about looking forward. What are some of the things that advice you might give to corporations about what they should be working on in the next 12 months in the area of cyber best practices? What are some of the suggestions you may have and some of the projects you're working on internally at the agency level for your various government levels? Dave, do you want to start?
Yeah, some of the things that we've already discussed. Focus on your incident response plan. Focus on your business continuity plans. Bad things are going to happen. No matter how well you prepare for them, things happen. And it's not the time to be guessing when they do. having a plan in place, who has roles and responsibilities, who to call, have a call tree, understand the communication flow. Your incident response plan isn't going to be all encompassing of every single type of incident that can occur, but it at least should lay out that framework of who's in charge, who grabs the reins on things and runs with it. Because if you're guessing at that point, you're in for a rough ride. And the business continuity, making sure that you've done the business impact analysis, that you have the recovery strategies in place to pull data back if you need to. Just plan for the worst, hope for the best, and plan for the worst. As far as cybersecurity goes, honestly, pick a framework and execute. You look at the cybersecurity framework from NIST. It's a condensed version of the NIST framework that we use in state government. The NIST framework is huge. I mean, it's a beast. If you're just starting out, that's not probably where you want to start. But starting with the cybersecurity framework is a condensed version. It's easier to follow. It's easier to execute. And go into it understanding you're going to have gaps, but that's what it's there for. It's to help you find those gaps, close those gaps, and do better. So, the best advice I can give you is adopt a framework and jump in and get started on those controls. And the cybersecurity framework is a really good place to start.
There are certain things you're implementing in the state for government agencies this next 12-month period that you're working on?
We've got a lot of things in motion, a lot of things I'm probably not going to talk about in a public forum, but we've done tremendous things over the last 18 months, but it's really a rock solid foundation to build on. And we're just going to continue to build on the stuff that we've put in place. I'm focusing more on my users. My users are the soft spot. Not because there's anything wrong with my users, they're just users. They've got 10,000 things to do. One of them is cybersecurity, but they got the 9,999 that consume 99.9% of their time. So my focus is going to be on my users and my endpoints. I want to make sure I've got visibility across everything, and then I've got the most informed user base that I can. And both of those combined, I think, is going to make us really, really strong as a state.
James, did you want to jump in?
Yeah. So the advice I would give for other IT organizations, if they're looking for it, I think it would be address at a very high level over your entire program, preventable human error. That's one of my main points that I always go back to the mayor and the senior leadership with is, I would say 99.99% of all cyber attacks, if not 100%, at some point involve human error. Whether it is a phishing click or a misconfigured server that led to ransomware in Atlanta or Baltimore, I mean, we're all human. We make errors, but if you address your focus on addressing those touch points, you'll at least make it harder for the bad guys to get in. The other thing I would say, I would encourage organizations, both private and government, to give the same care to your cybersecurity program and your information technology at the same level as you do business on it. So in Metro, 85% of our business is done with technology. So I keep pushing for the same level of care, the same level of funding to protect that 85% of critical business done on that technology. Looking forward for us, anticipating your next question, we're going to increase our to the device sensing and alerting and logging. We've identified some weak points in certain areas. Luckily, the COVID and the remote work increasing has allowed us to focus on that at an accelerated pace. So we're going to increase beyond just antivirus and endpoint detection response. We're going to increase our ability to take immediate action down at the individual device level. And then we're going to continue to grow at an enterprise level a comprehensive identity and access management program. I mean, we have one, but as a CISO, you're never satisfied with the way you have something set up, and there's always room for improvement. So my big thing over the next 12 to 14 months is comprehensive identity management and access management as a complete holistic program, not just as a piecemeal. We do certain things in certain places.
I think the one thing I want to point out, I want to use one word, and that's called accountability. I think that in every aspect of our life now, we're starting to look at accountability across all the, whether it be politics, whether it be our social contract with each other, but also with cybersecurity is accountability. Accountability to your workforce, that cybersecurity is their responsibility, not just the IT shop's responsibility, but accountability to all your business partners, your vendors, your suppliers, supply chain security. Nobody does this by themselves anymore. Nobody is in business and is only operating with everything that they produce. So you depend on other people. So holding them accountable for their cybersecurity, just like you're being held accountable for yours. I mean, your customers, your employees are holding you accountable for cybersecurity. You need to hold your vendors, suppliers, contractors accountable too, your infrastructure providers, making sure that they're taking cybersecurity, because if they're weak, then you're weak too, because you're depending upon them. I mean, one of the things that COVID has really taught us is about how we are dependent on real-time supply chains. I mean, there's a lot of organizations that have been impacted as we started saying, hey, we're not going to allow these ships to dock because we're worried about COVID coming ashore, with those containers or with things, all those, parts for different electronics or different parts of, our business were sitting out there as well. We couldn't get, people had to start rationing. They had to start finding other suppliers or other parts, maybe things that were made here versus made overseas. And that's what we were looking at is, do you really look at your business, continuity plan and say, does this account for everything, not just the cyber things, but the physical things that cause a cyber impact as well? How many people's organization changed when you couldn't, go to work every day? A lot of people had VPN solutions, but those VPN solutions could only handle 20%, 30% of your workforce, and suddenly you needed 80 to 90%. What happens when your IT personnel can't walk into the server room every day? These are all the things that, the world has changed, and holding people accountable, as he said, whether it's asking for more money to say, hey, put us on the same pillar as operations, or put us on the same pillar as, business privacy. Those are the things that we have to look at, but also holding our business partners, our employees, our customers responsible for their data or how they're using our data. I mean, that's the big thing I think that's leading forward in all of this, because we're only going to become more and more dependent on technology. It's not going to go away. We're not going to go back to pen and paper. We're not going to go back to phone calls. It's all going to be done by computer. So being able to hold accountable and to validate data and data sets is going to become more and more important moving forward. Collaborative workspaces such as this one or others are going to pop up, and making sure they're implemented both securely and efficiently and fast is going to be, the big thing. And from our standpoint at the national level, so my agency, one of the big things that we're working on is tracking all of this. And we're trying to build what's called a common operating picture. We have a really good common operating picture when it comes to physical events. So if a hurricane hits the East Coast, we can look and see what everything is impacted from that physical event. Well, we want to do the same thing with cyber and then merge the two. So when a hurricane hits, does that cause more attacks to be done cyber? And then what's the domino effect? If this particular place over here gets hit by ransomware and it's the supply chain for the healthcare industry, how many hospitals does that affect? What's the downstream effects of this place being out of business for 4 hours? If this router goes down, we have to reroute internet traffic through someplace else, and Amazon get a 2-second delay or a half a second delay. What did that cost them? We want to look at these things from a bigger picture and say, can we actually trace, from the point of impact to the kinetic effect throughout, how a physical or cyber attack hurt the country as a whole, or an individual state or an individual county? What was the streamline effect from all of that? That's what we're working on. It's not going to be easy.
Well, that's a good note to conclude on. I want to thank everyone for participating. And for those that are listening, I hope that you've gotten an earful of opportunity, as well as learned that at the end of the day, it is accountability. So we appreciate your time today. We have one more session in the Talk Cybersecurity Summit, and you can go into Eventbrite and join to be in the Zoom area, or you can see it on Facebook Live. Thank you so much again to our panelists, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you on the next call.
Thanks for having us, Dawn.
Yeah.